So when you download the template, the first thing you'll need to do is enable macros. You do want to be aware that some macros can have malicious code, so it's always important to make sure whatever you are opening, you know it is a safe document and appropriate for enabling macros. To enable the macros for this document, you're going to find where you saved it, right-click to open. You want to go down and find the actual properties. And when that opens up, we're going to scroll to the bottom on the General tab and look for Attribution Security. Here's where you want to unblock. I'll apply it and I'll click OK. In addition, now that I open this document, I'm likely to get a security warning, a yellow bar at the top of it that says some active content has been disabled. There is that. So we're going to click Enable Content. This will ensure that all the macros and all the formulas that are built into this spreadsheet work properly. There are several areas that you can update and customize for your municipality. You should only need to change these areas when the actual information changes. For instance, employee names and employee pay rates. As those change, you'll need to go in and change your master template. Same for equipment. We can update the equipment areas. So as you add or remove equipment from your fleet, you're going to need to update that. You might also have to update your product costs. We'll show that in a moment as well. So let's get into customizing this for your municipality. You'll notice that in some places you have multiple lines that may not all be needed for your town or your city. For instance, if you don't have 10 employees, you might be tempted to delete these extra rows. You're going to find, though, that the Excel file is locked in some ways where you can't delete those extra rows because it would impact the rest of the information and how the system or the Excel file functions. So instead, you can just ignore those extra spaces or delete the cell content so that you just have a blank cell. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug in some employee names here. And we'll start customizing. We'll say that we have 6 employees. So I have extra space here. And again, I could just delete those cell contents, or I can leave it, whatever you prefer. The next thing we're going to customize related to this employee field are the rates of pay. So let's imagine that each of these employees is making $24 an hour for straight pay. And when they go out for overtime, that's time and a half. So we're going to update under column G for rows 16 through 21, their rate for overtime to be $36. Again, you would do whatever is specific to your group. Here's where we can delete those extra lines if we want, the extra cell contents, but it won't impact the file if we don't. The next thing that we can update is our equipment. So you'll see we have several different types of equipment already plugged in. This might be where you need to just change some lines, where you want to delete some cell contents, or just edit them so that it better reflects what your equipment is. If you have numbers for your fleet, whatever that might be. I'm going to leave most of this as is for the example, but what I will do is change a couple of these to show that process. So we will say that this 3 to 5 ton truck has a plow and liquid sprayer. And we will say that we don't have a 10-wheel truck, so I'm going to delete that line. And perhaps down here under Other, we're going to remove the second Other, but we're going to change the first one to Sidewalk Spreader. So now you see we've got some space here. If I want to see all of my equipment lined up nice and neat in this column, you can just paste what you want, cell by cell, so that it's all in one row. Next thing we need to do here is we need to update our equipment rate. This is dependent upon if you're going to use this, if you are actually tracking your costs for equipment. That could include for your community fuel costs, maintenance costs, depreciation. But if you have that hourly figure, you do want to update this here because the Excel file is actually keeping track of that based on the number of hours on each piece of equipment per storm. So right now we have $100 in. That's completely arbitrary, but let's imagine that for most of our equipment, it has an $80 per hour cost for my community. The 3 to 5 tons, a little more expensive. We'll keep that at 100. Our grader and our other equipment, let's imagine, is a little less expensive. And our sidewalk spreader is costing us $40 an hour. So again, you'll update that specific to your community. The other line you can update is which type of materials you are using. So you'll see the template comes with salt, liquid 1, liquid 2, sand, treated salt, and other in A8 through A13, as well as K8 through K13. A8 starts where you're going to be putting it in on a storm-by-storm basis, whereas K8 starts where you're going to see the cost of that use for that storm. But you can actually change the titles if you want. So if your liquid 1 is brine and your liquid 2 is premium liquid, you can update that for your template, but I would update it the same on both areas. And the other thing you'll want to be aware of is when we leave the storm data entry sheet and we go over to storm report tally, you will want to update this area as well because it is not going to self-populate or self-update. You see that liquid 1 still shows up and liquid 2 still shows up here under the town's material use. So we'll want to change those fields to brine as well as premium liquid also, just so that it's a little easier to read later because we have consistent titles. Going back over to storm data entry, one area of the spreadsheet we haven't looked at yet is contractor totals. Whereas much of the spreadsheet is driven by a cost per unit and a cost per hour and is doing the calculations for you, this is one area where you will put a straight dollar line item amount based upon your invoice or what your contractor has communicated per storm. So for instance, if your contractors tell you that they had 100, or let's imagine that your contractor tells you they use 20 tons of salt, and that each of those tons cost you $100 for a total of $2,000 of salt for this storm. And if they use 20 gallons or 20 units of liquid, and each of those cost you $200, they would give you a flat amount of $4,000 for that storm. Same for labor hours and equipment hours. If they say it was 10 hours, both for labor and for the equipment, and they bill your labor at $100 per hour, you'll have a flat line amount of 1,000. If they build the equipment at $50 per hour, you would end up with $500 for equipment. So this is where you'll put the direct amount that actually comes off your invoice. It's not going to calculate it anywhere else. But you do see, if we go up and we look at the yellow boxes up at the upper right, it's starting to track those costs. So it is keeping track of the costs, but based on the straight entry that you put in there. You can, however, for your contractors, if you wanted to change the materials, similar to what we did over on the town material line, you can do that. You could update this, for instance, to say premium liquid, brine, whatever they might be using. You could change those areas if you wanted to track that. Very important in addition is we want to update the rates for the product. So this will be a part of the file that you may have to update periodically. If you have new rates, if you order a new product and it comes in and you pay a different amount for it, you want to go in and change this as needs be. So right now, everything is just a $100 arbitrary amount. But let's say for salt, I'm paying $85 a ton. For brine, I am paying just slightly more than that to make it in-house. Let's say it ends up being $90 per unit. For premium liquids, let's say we're spending $115 per unit. Sand, we'll say 45, and treated salt, let's put in 110. And let's imagine that we don't have any other product that we use. So we will just delete that line and we'll do the same over here. So again, I won't have to change these rates until my product costs actually change. And what it will do is it will calculate based upon the tons used each storm, how much we spent in product cost. For instance, if we just put in 3 ton right now, we see that product jumped to $255 for the cost for this storm. So we've updated our cost per ton or per unit. We've updated our employees' names. We've updated the materials we use, our employees' pay rates, our contractor information, as well as our equipment costs. The only other thing you might need to update ahead of using this, if you are going to use the public sand bin tally tab, you'll want to go in and adjust those formulas. So as they sit right now, these formulas are based upon 2.6 tons per bucket load and a rate of $18.30 per ton for sand. So what this will help keep track of year over year is how many buckets of sand you put back into your public sand bin pile, and therefore how many buckets have been used by your citizens. So this is driven by how many buckets are in a ton for you. So in this case, we are saying that every 2 bucket loads that we put in is equal to 5.2 tons. If we put 1 bucket load in, it is 2.6 tons. So we can assume that the bucket on our machine is about 2.6 tons of salt is what it will, or of sand is what it will hold. If, however, your bucket is slightly bigger and it holds 3.5 tons of sand, you would want to update the formula to reflect that. If you have a piece of equipment that is going to be smaller and perhaps it holds just 2 tons of sand, you would want to update that so that every time you put a bucket in, it's tracking how many tons that is appropriately. You also need to update the cost. If your sand is not costing you $18.30 a ton, you're going to want to put in what it does cost per ton. And we said that ours was costing us $45, I think. Yep. So we will update that cell to be $45. You see here that this formula carries all throughout from column C and column D all the way down. So although we've updated cell C3 and cell D3, we do need to carry the formula all through. What you want to do is hover over your updated cell C3 till you see the plus sign, click, hold down your mouse and drag all the way down. And we're going to stop at line 43 because if we proceed past 43, we're carrying the formula through our totals, which we don't want to do. We're doing the same for cell D3. Hover until we see the plus sign, click and drag it all down. Stop at line 43. And now if we take a look, we should see that it has corrected these. So as we move down through, it's using the correct $45 per ton, and it's using the correct 2 ton per bucket load. You will have to update this for each year subsequently because the upcoming years are set up in terms of the template, but you see that we have an arbitrary $1 per ton and the 2.6 tons per bucket. So you'll have to clean that up as you go to each year. Once you have all of your spreadsheet populated with your customizable town or city specific information, save it somewhere where you will have that template and you're ready to begin using it.